Over the past 3 weeks, I flew around the entire world just to play Vintage. All right, it's been quite a while. Welcome back, Vintage Gamers. It is the middle of December now, and I left you at the end of November. I've been away for 3 weeks or so, seeing the world and playing Magic the Gathering. I was able and lucky enough to fly out to Italy. I was in Florence for a little while, and then played Eternal Weekend in Lucca, and then trained down to Rome, spent a day in Rome, flew out to Japan, a couple days in Kyoto, a little side trip to Osaka for a vintage tournament, which was awesome. I'll tell you about that in a little bit. And then back to Tokyo for an extended stay in Tokyo and a short trip down to Yokohama for Eternal Weekend Asia. So I was able to combine some high profile vintage tournaments around the world with a nice long vacation, seeing tons of really, really cool things. And this video will primarily be to talk about the tournaments, and I have some round by round results from the two main events. And we'll talk about my deck, we'll talk about more vintage focused things, and then maybe at the end I'll do a quick little slide show run through. I have a big 800 photo album. Whatever you're interested in from this video, I'll try to timestamp it as best I can so you can jump around and see what you want to hear about. As for me, this will hopefully air on Wednesday, and that same Wednesday, I will boot up a stream and get some vintage videos going again. I know I really sad I didn't have a backlog for this whole 3 week break, but it was a nice departure from the norm, and I think a well-deserved vacation. There are a bunch of cool decks from Eternal Weekend in Japan, including a food chain list that went 34th, a top 8 PO list with Ancient Tombs, and then I'll tell you about a really fun deck that I almost lost to, that maybe we'll play on a Wednesday night as well. It is, of course, December and Christmas season, and I will be off work at some point. But before and after that, there will be lots of obligations for me. So I'll try to let people know when and where I'm going to be streaming. But I will definitely like to get back to Monday, Wednesday, Friday vintage videos. So without further ado, I know that everyone loves a good deck pick. I don't really care, but I have been getting upgrades slowly to my paper vintage deck. So I figured I'd show you. This is a pick from the end of the event. Not the deck list that I played in Japan. Oh, sorry, not the deck that I played in Europe. It's the one I played in Japan, but they were both very similar, just a couple cards off. And I figured we'll just take a quick peek and see where we're at here. Obviously, I have the 3 Tundra mana base now. If you look at these nice foil foreign Japanese Misty Rainforest and Scalding Tarn and Meticulous Archive, I actually acquired those in Japan, and you'll find out why further along this video. But I've been trying to have a nice mix of foils and non-foils so that I can play this Mental Misstep with no foil patterns in my deck. And these are mostly just cards that I've acquired along the way. I don't usually try to go out of my way to get the best possible printings. I am, looking for more of the retro frame aspect. Obviously, we can upgrade this Polluted Delta, but it's, I think, a nice looking deck in general. Anything else to stand out here? Not particularly. I'll go through the deck list in a little bit more of a parsable manner over here. I guess that's not that much more parsable when you look at it. But this is my Jeskai PO list. I don't know how long I really need to talk about the deck because I have talked to death about the deck. It's the deck I've been playing for ages now, and I'm pretty set on my ways on what I wanted from the deck. Obviously, we made that shift to 3 Tundra to open up sideboard slots and not play the basic planes. I think that worked out great in Japan and poorly in Europe. We'll talk about why during our matches here, but I still really like the flexible Lorien revealed and Sink into Stupor slots as things you can get off of Trainer that are still lands. I really think that the swords is more powerful than the portable hole, but the portable hole has some nice aspects in the main. But the swords, I really like having heavy mono white answers because mono white is super popular, and especially in Japan, it was very, very popular. So the swords, Chain of Vapor, dress down flex slots were unbelievable. I believe I would never play this deck without Chain of Vapor in it again. This was one of the biggest misses I found from my original builds that I put along the way. And this is why you should probably pay attention to, deck builders like Dissolutionist Sean, even though sometimes his verbiage in the Discord is hard to parse. There are very, very concrete and solid ideas in there. And Chain of Vapor is a card that I think I missed because it didn't really work particularly well in the old Tinker PO decks. Because you had a lot of permanence and it was a little clunky in that sense. But in here, where you're like Chain of Vaporing your own Snapcasters and Thunder Traps and making tons of mana off of Moxen, I had my highest Chain of Vapor sacrifice lands of all time. And then in my Japan tournament, I sacrificed 4 lands to Chain of Vapor to win the game. I still think the Flusterstorms are the best way to push through your proactive pieces, even though the meta doesn't lend towards Flusterstorm as much as it used to. I think you want to, although this deck is definitely a control deck with a combo finish, you want to make sure you're still doing a proactive, paradoxical stock up game plan, making your opponent have to answer your powerful spells, and Flusterstorm is the best way to push those things through. The one card that I would consider maybe cutting is this second Opal. It's really tough because you want to have 2 Opals to make sure your PO is the best it can possibly be. PO is not very good unless you're bouncing back a blue Moxen. It's still good, but it's at its best when it's bouncing back a blue Moxen. And so having extra Opals is good, but you're almost always boarding at least 1, sometimes 2 Opals out on the side. So I'm thinking if there was ever a slot where I want to make my deck a little bit more, I don't know, how they have that portable hole in the main, have a better answer somewhere, this Opal has got to be the slot where we can make changes. I could also say that this Mishra's Bauble is not as effective as I used to be. That being said, I do like having a variety of recurable Lurrus targets to make sure your Lurrus is good. If your Lurrus isn't recurring anything, it's not actually that strong in Vintage. It's still quite conceptually good, but Bauble has the extra upside of turning on the Opal Metalcraft, but if we have 1 less Opal, maybe we need Metalcraft less. So I'm considering maybe making a change on the Mishra's Bauble Opals here and putting in some other spells to find an avenue to push the deck forward, but I haven't made any concrete decisions yet, and you'll hear from me when I do. Sideboard, the 4 swords is mandatory. The Pyroblasts have been kind of mid, but they're really important when you play like a stock up mirror. So if you're in red already and you are going to be in red because of Flame of Venor is an unmatched card. It's unbelievably powerful, super strong in this deck because it shores up creatures, artifact hate, and it's always a draw spell. It's very, very good, and the reason to be in red. Like Fourth Earling is nice, and Pyroblast is nice, and you're going to play them when you're in this red-white combination. But Flame of Venor is the big reason that you're stretching your mana base to play Volcanic Island. That being said, I also want to experiment a little bit more, going back towards Esper and being a little bit more Vault Key focused, just because I do find this deck is sometimes underpowered. It is, first and foremost, I would say a big controlling deck, and it has a powerful combo option. And I do feel that Vintage has gotten a little bit more powerful than when this deck was first doing very well. And I do find that my deck is very Jund-esque in that you can have good game against every deck, but you're not having a lot of strong matchup win rates. And that could be changed if we flip some things around. So the second Lantern in the sideboard, just because it's a strong piece of Dredge Hate that also is decent to bring in against Breach. Having 2 Lanterns against Breach was the max number I felt happy about. So that's why there's a second Lantern in the sideboard. Then Pyroblasts, like I said, Portable Hole. I could see going up to a 3rd Portable Hole or playing a Portable Hole in the main instead of an Opal maybe. That's a possibility. Portable Hole has been a fantastic tool, especially against Lurrus Frog. Over Encumbered is a card I still have not cast. At the end of this video, you'll see me talk about maybe 30 plus rounds of tournament Magic. I have played no Dredge, just none. And that doesn't mean this card was a wrong choice. Both of at least Japan, which we know about, had a significant proportion of Dredge players. But I just have not played against Dredge. Though what I can say is that everyone who has trusted my deck list and played Over Encumbered has told me it was fantastic. So I've had maybe 4, 5, 6 players come up to me, talk to me about Magic, talk to me about the deck and playing the deck, and Over Encumbered has been great for all of them. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that it's still conceptually a great idea. And again, this is Over Encumbered is a card that was really pushed by MTGO user Chess Knight in like a mono white prison-y style deck, and then recently adapted by Sean Dissolutionist. And I really, while translating Over Encumbered, the concept of Over Encumbered in terms of letting your opponent interact with your starting Dredge Hate and then playing this over the top and then being able to protect it with like a counter spell wasn't really apparent to everyone right away. And Sean wasn't doing the best of job explaining it in the Breach Discord. So in translating Sean's words to the rest of the Discord, I actually talked myself into this card as a PO option because I'm already in white, I'm already a Lurrus deck, and it actually really fits with the game plan of me pushing like trainers and stock ups and stuff on the first couple turns, and then hitting over the top with Over Encumbered protected by Flusterstorm. So I wanted to go with a Mindbreak Trap this time around just because there's a lot of trappable targets in Paper. Paper tends towards a little bit more aggro-based decks that are trying to play things on turn 1, a little bit more Jewel decks that are trying to combo off, some random Tinker decks and things, so I wanted to have the trap. For Europe, I played a Hurkyl's Recall. Sphere Shops has been on the up and up, especially on Magic Online, as a way to counter the active metagame. And I wanted to not, the first Hurkyl's is a low cost for a very high power effect, especially when you have Merchant Scroll in your deck. So the first Hurkyl's is 1 sideboard slot for a huge gain against a variety of workshop matchups. I did not play this Hurkyl's in Japan, and I'll talk about that a little bit when we go over the deck list change. And then 1 negation and 1 consign for those combo-oriented artifact-based matchups. So, like I said, this is not news to anyone. This is the deck I've been playing for years. This is the deck I got 2 top 8s with in challenges right before the tournaments. So it shouldn't have surprised anyone that this is what we chose to play for the trip. Talk about the trip. We started in Italy, in Lucca, for Eternal Weekend Europe, run by Four Seasons and Bose. And I'll talk a little bit right now about the tournament itself. Incredible tournament. It is everything I wanted when I put my back behind Four Seasons as the European TO that should be running this kind of event. The way I describe it is you can tell that the people running the tournament give a shit. They care. They want the players to have the best experience possible. And when things weren't working, they made changes. And this is a great sign for EU moving forward that Eternal Weekend can become a staple tournament for them. It's been a long time, if ever, since that has been the case. Like I said, this tournament hall was great. The location is probably not like amazing. Lucca is not, is a little off the beaten path. You have to, train there from like Florence or Bologna or something. But the hall and the city are well equipped to deal with this kind of event. Lucca hosts LuccaCon, which for all intents and purposes is Europe's San Diego Comic-Con. So a very big event. And this hall was huge, well lit, spacious. We had food trucks, vendors. The prize wall actually worked, where you could trade prize wall tickets for, it's like 5 tickets for €4 worth of vendor coupons to go get the cards you want. You could trade prize wall tickets for food truck coupons to get lunch, to get beer. It was incredible. I think the one big complaint from this event was the Vintage main event was not run on Melee. It was run on Companion. And Companion is I mean, it solidly ran the tournament. The problem is Companion has no live standings and it has no historical records for pairings or standings. So we're actually in a data black hole for this tournament where I don't have any kind of win rates or pairings or anything like that. I do know deck lists exist because they were input via Four Seasons website. So I'm going to try to get deck lists and make a metagame sheet so at least we have a metagame of what happened. But yeah, it's unfortunate, and I know why they did it, and I'm happy of the thought of why they did it, because Melee, if anyone played Eternal Weekend in North America, Melee, I paid $80 something to Melee to play in Eternal Weekend North America because they take a percentage cut based on the entry fee of everything. And so players in North America paid Melee hundreds of thousands of dollars to play in that event. And, when that can be avoided, it makes a lot of sense to do so. And for two or three of the larger events, I think maybe it was Pre-Modern was a large number, and the Legacy main event, they actually were run on Melee because Companion has a max size limit. And I believe Four Seasons and Bose ate the cost of Melee on those entries. So, hopefully over the course of 2026, we can see if more Magic the Gathering platforms develop for large tournaments that are not as parasitic as Melee, but hopefully if we have to, maybe we can go back to it just for data and live standing purposes, I would say. Either way, I would rate Eternal Weekend Europe as an outstanding success for the organizers, and I'm very confident it will be back there next year, and I will do everything I can basically to make it back to this tournament. So started on Thursday. That's another thing. This was a 4-day event. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. No event overlap, so you can play in all the events you want. They merged Paupergeddon, which is a huge Pauper tournament, 1,000 players, with Eternal Weekend, so that this was just like incredible gathering of Magic players. Vintage in one room, Pauper in the other. It was incredible. So we started on Thursday with team trios, and I formed basically the superstar all-star team. This is an unbelievably powerful team with Andrea Piemonte as our Pauper player and Brian Koval as our Legacy player, and I played Vintage. I can't ask for a better set of players here, and we played 6 rounds of team trios. I started off by playing Mono Black twice, and this shouldn't have been really a surprise to me, but somehow it still was, because if you're playing team trios sanctioned, which this was, lots of times Four Seasons is proxy friendly, so you can play anything. But this one is sanctioned, so if people are needing to play Vintage, then a lot of times a non-Vintage player will be stuck on the budget Mono Black deck, and it makes a lot of sense that I would run into it twice to start this tournament and get 2 basically free rounds. I will say I don't have any kind of round by round information except for the 2 main events. So if you want to see round by round things, hear about round by round, I have notes from those events. But for these smaller events, I just have this Twitter thread. Here I played against Frog, and then I played against Log T1 Rama on Frog as well. I had to play against Oath, a crazy round against Oath. I lost just an insane round against. I wish I had this one recorded because I ground out like a like a 35-minute game 1 where I used Soul Guide Lantern to stop Gaia's Blessing looping, and it was a very, very, very odd match. And then I also played against Doomsday, and our team went 5-1. And with our 5-1 record, we were able to get buys. So great start to the weekend. I got a round 1 buy in Vintage. Couldn't be happier about that. Buys are very, very broken. However, I did not sleep very well going into that event. And anyone who played a large Magic event knows that like sleep, hydration, food, all of these like physical aspects are really important. And that did not translate well into the main event. The main event, I don't know, where's my picture? The main event was huge. It was like 290 something players. Let me find the picture. I have a nice little picture of it. And this is a big deal because Europe Vintage for a while was shrinking. Eternal Weekend Vintage was shrinking. And I think this is a great sign moving forward that we can start reviving the scene out in Europe. So 228 players, which is an upgrade over last year. largest vintage event in Europe in a very long time. 228 players, 9 rounds. So I started round 1 with a bye. And so I actually do have, for this one, I have round by round things. I will apologize because normally I do these videos like right after a tournament. So I have some pretty good recollection of what was going on. But this is now, God, this was November 28th and it's now December 17th, 16th. So this is quite far. Why? Bye. So round 1, bye. Round 2, I'm playing against Spencer. Spencer's from the US. He's actually one of the people who was in my very large Airbnb, which is maybe part of the reason I didn't get a lot of sleep. And he was on the blue-black frog deck. I played a crazy 3-game set with Spencer. Game 1 was a back and forth. There was like an early Bowmasters and a stock up. And I let a Bowmaster resolve because I had no draw spells. And then I, of course, ripped Ancestral off the top. And so then I'll make force with some hard decisions. And then on his end step, I'm going to go for the Ancestral, go all in. And it works pretty well. I build up a thing, but I'm still not really quite there yet. I don't get enough to like combo off. However, on the last turn of the game, my Saga ticks down. I'm at like 1 or 2 life. My Saga gets me a Lotus, and my Lotus fourths for exactly 10. My opponent had only cracked a fetch the whole game, so I deal him 20 haste damage with 4th Eralinges. No PO or anything, just 12 mana, 4th Eralinges. You steal game 1, basically. Game 2, I actually joke about this. I was joking about this a lot during the tournament. Game 2 might have been the most powerful blue-black frog draw I have ever seen. My opponent led with Lotus Mox Ancestral, DT for Vexing Bauble, play Vexing Bauble, and then on the next turn play Frog. And so the game was just over on turn 1. And then game 3 was a slower game. We both kept like a low land count. And I ended up taking 13 damage from my Mana Vault over the course of the game. So you can tell, a nice long, grindy vintage match. At the end, I went for, I don't know if this is a mistake or just what happened, but like I went for a portable hole on a token because I want a big orc army token, because what I wanted to do was PO back my portable hole and get more targets for my portable hole. But then my opponent immediately played a frog right after I used my portable hole, and I couldn't actually deal with the frog because he had double forcible backup after. So I don't know if that was like a mistake or it was correct to like push towards my paradoxical outcome, but either way, I started this tournament off with a round 1 loss to a powerful wizard. Round 2, that was round 2 because I got around the round 1 bye. Round 3, I played up against Esper Lurrus, and this was actually like a Lurrus Volt Key, like an Oswald deck. This player has been doing quite well online. And, sorry, I don't have the names written down, and I don't have Melee to give me the names, but this player's been doing very well online, and actually had a great tournament. Did pretty well in the main, and I also think got 2nd place in the High Roller. So you can still play these fringe combo Lurrus decks. Even if they're not like the focus of the metagame anymore, they're still very, very powerful. And so he was on that, Paradoxical Outcome, Lurrus Volkey, Oswald deck. I had a slow opener where I trainered into a force, but then I made a huge play mistake and I bought a Lurrus instead of holding open 3 mana to pay for a Flusterstorm or a Spell Pierce. I didn't, in general, you would think Flusterstorm, but opponent had 1 Flusterstorm, 1 Spell Pierce, I believe. And so opponent ended up with the classic PO opener of like Mox, Mana Crypt, Opal, PO with Pierce backup. And so if I just don't buy Lurrus, I actually probably am in a good spot in that game. But just a complete play mistake, very self-inflicted loss. And then game 2, I had a fast opener, but I was like 1 short on POing off of Merchant Scroll to go to start. So I went with Ancestral. And then my Ancestral actually resolved, and I have double Force of Will up, but my opponent had a Bauble, so I had to force that, and then they had an Ancestral, I had to force that, and so then we're both lower resources, and I didn't really hit anything on my turn. I played a Trainer again and like missed on a counterspell, and my opponent untapped and went like Snap Ancestral, Tolarian, PO, win the game. So obviously like quite strong vintage draws from my opponent, but also like a clear and bad play mistake sets me out of contention to top 8 after round 3, where I started with a round 1 bye, just loss. And that can happen. Like what I always say, you know, some amount of vintage games you're going to win based on, you know, getting vintage and having a powerful draw. Some amount of vintage games you're going to lose because of that. And the games in the middle where you have that kind of agency, those are the games you have to play well. You have to win. And I didn't do that. So rough start to the day, but 9 rounds of vintage, and I want to, you know, I'm here to play vintage. I flew across an ocean to play vintage, and we're gonna continue on with the day. And round 4, I played a mirror, just a straight up mirror, and I was able to do my favorite part of the mirror, which is go for mana denial with Flame of Venor. Destroy your Mox and draw 2 is like such a strong play, and I was able to stop my opponent from, you know, I turned off Metalcraft. I was able to stop my opponent from going for PO, but then the opponent hit another Mox, and I, you know, was starting to get a little dicey. I went for a big 4th Aerlingus that only put my opponent to like, a half life total. But when I untapped, I stocked up into, or maybe he did a big 4th to me, but only put me to half life total. When I untap, I stocked up into PO, and I perfect PO into a win. And then in the second game, it was a little more of like a Mox Bobble, Mox PO win kind of, you know, same thing my opponent did to me last round. I was able to do to my opponent this round. And that's just sometimes how the mirror goes. The mirror, the Jeskai, you know, the Jeskai PO mirror is better than the old Tinker PO mirrors, but it's still a little dicey in terms of how much fun it is to play. Round 5, I finally played against a mono black player. And I had a really great match with this player. But I do want to stress that I am not. I'm going to talk. Let me first talk about what happened, and then I'll talk about it a little bit more. Game 1, opponent went Ritual into the new Cam Ball effect, and I forced it, and cycled Troll, and then left open 2 mana on the next turn. And leaving open 2 mana on the next turn is, for me, a clear signal that my opponent has Bowmaster. And so I can do my best to play around Bowmaster. But I didn't really actually have a lot of options. I have a Merchant Scroll, and my Merchant Scroll can get me different things like Chain, Ancestral Flame. And I had to, you know, see what kind of timing window I could do. So I ended up having to go for the Merchant Scroll. And my opponent... So now I don't have like the best notes, but it involved my opponent like letting that resolve and then going to end step. Break. I'm gonna misremember it. I feel bad. But basically, I scrolled for an Ancestral, and then my opponent plays a Bowmaster end step after I get the Ancestral, because you want to use your mana, right? So I Ancestral in response, and my opponent missteps it. Man, I just don't have the right notes anymore. So sad. Either way, what results in this is like a big timing window issue. Because I am aware that my opponent leaving 2 black mana open on turn 2 is a heavy signal for Bowmaster. I am allowed to play around that in different ways. And so from my opponent's side of the table, what would make more sense against an opponent who understands what 2 open black mana means is to main phase the Bowmaster so that you're sure it resolves and you don't get stuck in awkward timing windows. Because what happened in this game is I got like a slight timing window advantage where there was like a misstep on the stack and an Ancestral and a I think it was an Ancestral on the stack, a Bowmaster, and then a misstep. And I was able to force the misstep, resolve the let the Bowmaster resolve an Ancestral, or it's so frustrating because I just did not take good enough notes. But the main thing is the best play was to main phase the Bowmaster to give me no timing window advantage and make so things like Force of Will are less backbreaking. And the reason I bring this up is because later on I actually play this person's like friend and teammate in Legacy, and they're like, "Oh, I got revenge." You know, he beat me, and he's like, "I got revenge for my buddy who you're talking about the misplay." And when I talk about misplays on the channel, especially my own misplays, or not especially my own misplays, but including my own misplays, I'm never talking about, you know, a player individually or trying to talk down about anyone. what I want to do is bring up these things so that we can all together learn about them and we all get better together. Magic is so much fun when both players are improving and making the best possible choices. I love playing Magic like that. And so I always want myself to improve, and I always want my opponents to improve, and I want the community to grow together. So, like I said, I had a great match versus this player, and I wanted to make sure that they didn't feel like I was calling them out. But yeah, so basically, this happens a lot, and I learned it a lot during the Hullbreacher era. But sometimes you'll get like a huge blowout auto win if you hold your Hullbreacher or your Bowmaster till the point where it like really blows your opponent out. But more often than not, especially when you're playing against a player who understands the metagame a little bit, knows what holding open mana means for different decks, a lot of times you should really just play the main phase non-flash Bowmaster or Hullbreacher to make sure it resolves, make sure there's no bad timing windows. You're not going to get caught on the stack in an awkward situation. That's kind of the thing I want to talk about. I'm unfortunately, I don't remember the exact sequence, but it had to do with like scrolling for an Ancestral, and then my opponent like playing I can't remember who played the first spell, but I was able to like manipulate it to the point where I had an advantageous stack. My opponent maybe mental misstepped at like the wrong timing window or something like that as well, but a lot of that can be avoided with what we said with the main phase Bowmaster. So game 2 was like I kept an abysmal hand, but it's good against mono black. I kept like a 7-card, 2-land, like nothing really powerful hand. So like when you get turn 1 Thoughtseize, it just doesn't matter. My opponent did have a really powerful draw this time though, with like Thoughtseize into triple Wasteland Strip Mine, Null Rod. But I was able to use like Portable Hole and Chain. My opponent had like Reanimated Troll, but the matchup is so bad for mono black. It's so hard because the PO deck is so consistent and has so many carded selection and advantage engines with the trainer and the stock up. Like if you rip apart my hand, a lot of times I can just rebuild, and that's kind of what happened here. So a mono black existing actually is a big reason to play the Lurrus PO deck because it's a nice, it might be the most polarizing matchup for the Lurrus deck in the entire format. Round 6, I ended up on playing against Lurrus Deathrite Shaman, and I had like a really powerful back and forth 3-game set. Game 1 was a slow Moxen hand, and I had a flame. And I was able to use the flame to like kill a resolved oof. Even though my opponent like Bowmastered in response to the flame or something like that. And then with the resolved, with the oof dead to flame, I was just able to, run my opponent out of cards and combo kill them. And that's again the big upside of flame is that it's just it's a draw spell that has a removal spell tacked onto it for some reason. So you just have the option and the ability to not play too many like narrow sword style effects in your deck. You have a bunch more removal spells. In game 2, I got my turn 1 Pearl consigned, and I flustered it to make sure it resolved. And then I used my Mana Crypt to buy Lurrus, but I got super choked out on mana. My Lurrus got Abrupt Decayed, and I got like Wasteland into a cruise and died. It was really like a frustrating one. One of the games where I really needed a basic planes, actually. Not having the ability to fetch basic planes really hurt me there. And then game 3, back and forth early game. I had Lurrus and some early trainers, but I actually just completely ran out of action. This doesn't happen often, but it sometimes still happens. And I had to force a will like a Kishla Skimmer. And because I used Force of Will on Kishla Skimmer, my opponent was unable to force my last card stock up. I had the ability to win this game still. I had 3 different top decks. I could, 3 attempts of top decking, and I had a bunch of really good outs, but I just missed. Sometimes, it doesn't matter how consistent your deck is, you just don't draw the right cards. If you don't draw the right cards, you can't win. So it was a close 3-game set. Easily could go out either player's way, and it doesn't go my way. And so now I'm 3-3. Now I'm super dead for basically everything. But again, I was like pretty excited to play 3 more rounds. And so I wanted to play one more round. In round 7, I played against Blueback Frog, another powerful player, and I just got run over. I got a Lotus Frog Ancestral from my opponent on turn 1. They forced my Ancestral, played a ton of mana. I had a ton of mana, but I had a Lurrus and no action again, and I died. And then game 2, my opponent went Lotus Ancestral, long goodbye my Lurrus, and then again I have infinite mana and no action. And so that was like a really brutal like Lotus Ancestral start defeat. And I decided, it really wasn't my day, and I was like really behind on sleep, so I decided to drop at that point and try to catch up on sleep so I could play Legacy to the best of my ability. And so yeah, so I actually went home really early that day, like 4 or 5 p.m. and I kind of just tried to sleep all night and try to catch back up. So yeah, a really disappointing 3-4 finish. Like I said, I think the lessons from this event are, it is of course always important to keep your physical state up. Playing a long tournament is hard. Playing Magic is hard, and if you don't get enough sleep, you don't get enough water, you don't get enough food, you're gonna have a hard time playing the event. And this was a big misplay in round 3, and then I do believe I got a little bit, I hit the rough side of variance along the way here. So catching this one big misplay here and learning from it is going to be important. But then some of these other matches are just things that are outside of my control. So for me, it's like, what am I taking from this? Okay, I need to work harder at making sure I'm in the best physical condition to play the tournament. And 3, make sure I'm not missing key interaction points of things like being able to hold open for Flusterstorm. In Legacy in Europe, I did play the event. I played JPA, Rug, Sneak Attack. I don't have round by round notes from this event, but I do have the thread. I was told leading into this event that Show and Tell is back. And this is a deck I really enjoy in Legacy, where it's still playing the broken cards: Ancient Tomb, Stock Up, Ponder, Brainstorm, Force, Traxa. But it is a little bit easier to navigate for me, the Ponders and Brainstorms of this deck, in comparison to something like Delver or Tempo. I did buy the cards for Blue Red Tempo, but I decided that this was more my wheelhouse. It is a straightforward game plan. Your Brainstorms are like, do I have A plus B, A plus B? And if I do have A plus B, do I have mana, and do I have counter magic backup? And it's very simple to grasp the basic patterns and the basic combinations of cards you're looking for, and that makes it very nice for someone who doesn't play Legacy as often. And I thought this was actually a very good choice for the weekend. It does have some issues with the blue-red matchup, but I actually played against blue-red a ton in this tournament, and it was totally fine. If I had to go back, I probably would play the Julian Jacobitz. Why am I like the Juju Bean? I don't know why I'm saying it so weird. The Juju Bean list, different kind of show and tell, being able to board into Barrowglyphs, that kind of sounds interesting to me. But I didn't mind this list at all, and I actually liked it quite a lot. Eternal Weekend in Europe was almost 1,000 players, 964 players. An amazing turnout. European Legacy community is large and very active and awesome. I played all 14 rounds of this tournament, which was actually crazy. And you can see some of the things here. I actually started with a round 1 loss to Grixis Control before pairing into Eldrazi, which was unfortunate for my Eldrazi player because this deck is so good against non-blue. Got to beat up on blue-red and Forge. I played against a very strong lands player, and that matchup should also be very good for me, but I just missed a little bit too much and died. Beat up another blue-red player, and then another blue-red player, and I mean these were good blue-red matchups, but I don't think that matchup is as good as I started with. So it started 3-0 against blue-red. Then in my last match of the day was crazy. I played against blue-black Stompy Wheels deck. This deck was the coolest deck I played against all day. It was like Hull Breacher, LED, Twister card, Bowmaster, but it had Ancient Tombs. It was a really, really cool deck. I was able to sneak by that going 6-2. And then there was 131 players in day 2, which is an odd number. And so I got a bye in round 1 of day 2. That's just the most lucky thing I've ever seen. Actually just getting a straight up bye in day 2 of a tournament and still alive, still in contention at X2. So wild. Then I played against Bug, beat that lost a beat bug, but then finally played against a really strong blue red player and lost. Beat another blue black player, and then this turbo reanimator deck came out of nowhere and just like turn one, turn two me both games. It was really really rough, and at that point I'm pretty much out of the running for a promo. And then I played a very nice match at the end of the day against Tempo Doomsday. Had a lot of fun. Like I said, I didn't know what to think about Legacy. I didn't practice Legacy at all. I played 0 games of post-ban Legacy. I just sleeved up a JPA list and said, we'll jam. I will say that I thought these Veils were awful. They did nothing for me, but I thought these carpets were incredible. So I wasn't upset about the green splash. These carpets were just the only way you really beat blue-red is like turn 1 carpet. So the carpets were great. I actually think Legacy is in a pretty great spot. I kind of thought it was in a pretty decent spot the last tournament I played in, which was pre-ban. But obviously Legacy players, had a different opinion, and I think most players seem to be fairly happy post-ban. So I can highly recommend Legacy right now as another alternative to format if you're interested. So then I'm flying to Japan, and I make a slight adjustment in my list. But nothing crazy. I'm still playing the same cards in the main. The only change I made here is, well, I made a mana change just because of card availability, but I swapped the Hercules Recall, which I didn't think was going to have as many targets. And there's less Sphere Shops players in Japan, and so I wanted to play another Consign because there's tons of Jewel players in Japan, and I thought Consign would give me a little bit of a better matchup into Jewel. I actually started my vintage events in Japan with a surprise. I had no idea that the 17th Emperor of Vintage tournament was happening in Osaka the weekend before Eternal Weekend. So I was already in Kyoto at the time. So I said, fuck it, I'll stay an extra day in more Western Japan. And I just I just woke up in the morning and took a train down to a different city. Easy, no problem. And signed up for this, 47 player vintage tournament that had 3 other tournaments running at the same time. I don't have notes from this tournament, but God, do I wish I had notes from this tournament because it was crazy. I played super long, super complicated matches. I wouldn't have had any time to write down any notes from any of these matches. But this was so much fun and such a pleasure. Playing versus Japanese players is a little different than playing against everyone else. A little quieter, a little bit less. Actually, I thought that they were pretty vocal about changing phases, which is really nice. At the start of the event, the start of the matches usually show your 15 card sideboard to show that you have, all the cards and you're representing exactly what you're representing. I really enjoyed it. The only thing I don't enjoy about Japanese Magic is the tables are really small and they're very crammed together. That would be the biggest problem for me. But like actually playing the games against Japanese players who had, varying degrees of English proficiency was no problem. Even the players who couldn't speak any English, I felt like, Magic has its own language per se, and communicating was not an issue. And everyone was so respectful and nice, and it was great to play against all the players I played against over the 2 weeks in Japan. So this tournament, I played against Frog. Eldrazi was a really close match versus Eldrazi. I barely squeaked by Eldrazi. 2 matches versus Mono White, one which I won, one which I lost. And then this was really funny. I wanted to just highlight this. I played against a crazy workshop deck, and this guy was hilarious. He was a really fun player to play against. I not to stereotype too much, but I would say he was the opposite of the average Japanese player. He was very loud, very enthusiastic. He kind of reminded me on stream almost. Game 2 of this matchup, I lost game 1 in like a really close match where I almost came back with a PO at the very end, but didn't make it there. It's like 1 mana short. And so game 2, I'm in my upkeep of turn 1, and he goes, stop. I'm trying to go to my upkeep in turn 1. He goes, stop. Pre-game effects. And I go, pre-game effects? And he slams a Leyline of Anticipation under the table. I was like, okay, yeah, Leyline of Anticipation. And he goes, in your upkeep, Mox, yep, Vexing Bauble. It's like, no, please, not like this. So I had to force on the Vexing Bauble. I was able to win that in 3 games and actually go to round 6 with pretty good breakers, I thought. And so I had some unsafe breakers. So I just drew. I just said I needed a break. Let's just draw. And I snuck into top eight, eighth. It was very, very close. And this was one of the wildest top eights I've ever played. All the matches were super long and super complex. In game one, round one of quarters, I played against Oath, where my opponent played turn one Show and Tell Atraxa, and I won. I just like chained, so I ancestraled, and then at some point I chained the Atraxa, and then at some point I was looping dress downs with Lurrus. It was so wild. My opponent went down to like no cards, and I won on like the last possible turn. It was really incredible. Then I played against a Breach, which was like a really long match that came down to like I had maybe 5 cards left in my library. Just unbelievable matches. And then I made it all the way to the finals where my opponent just ran me over on Oath. He was like land box, Vexing Bauble with Veil of Summer backup game one into one of Thoughtseize, into one of Wasteland. Like, all right, you've bested me. Game two was a little bit closer. I think I had some options. Maybe I didn't play like perfectly, but I got a nice second place here at the Emperor of Vintage tournament, which was really fun. Just a great time. I'm really glad I went. I'm glad I hanged out with the players from Osaka. I'm sad I didn't win this event. I really wanted to get my pick. You can't see. You can see over here. These are the pictures on the wall of the current emperors. I really wanted to be the emperor. That would have been really cool. But second place is a pretty good finish, all in all. I actually think I have a picture of me with my my prize. Where is that? That was a pretty funny one. Here's me, because I tweeted side quest acquired, become Emperor of Vintage, and I said side quest failed, second place. This is a really cool little it's like a hard token. I'm gonna use it for a night token, I believe, but really sweet. Yeah, it was a fun event. So I had a nice, reassurance that my deck was still good, that my deck was good in Japan. So that was like a nice confidence booster going into Eternal Weekend. Eternal Weekend in Asia for Vintage was 200, and my data sheet says 299 players. I know for sure that was over 290. The data sheet said 299. And I do have that data sheet here. This is up and on my Twitter if you need to go look at it. I did a recap of this data for Patreon, but the biggest takeaway is just going very quickly is that Initiative was the most played deck. Lurrus, if you combine the two Lurrus decks, that was the most played deck. So like a huge chunk of the field was Lurrus, Frog, Initiative, a big portion of Lurrus PO, like far more than normal, which seems to be happening in paper a lot. A huge portion of Dredge, not more than online, but more than Europe for sure. Like 8.5% Dredge. And then, like I said, big contingents of Oath and Jewel, which are two Japanese paper decks that players really enjoy over there. And that's something I said in my the weeks leading up to the tournament. I said Oath and Jewel will be overrepresented in paper in Japan because that's just how it is. You should be pretty interested in this big portion of Scam as well, which I also thought was pretty likely to happen. Though some of them were like Blue-Black Powered Scam, which even put a player into the top 8 with Blue-Black Powered Scam. But the Mono-Black Scam was prevalent and performed really poorly. All the big decks performed well, and then some of the, like Oath and Scam and Raker Shops didn't. But all the most played decks actually had great tournaments feeding on the, the unpowered decks or the Belcher decks, the Infect decks. There were a lot of players on the bottom here playing, Brews and pet decks. And that kind of results in like a bit, you'll see this a lot in paper sanctioned Magic is you'll have all of the established decks get a bit of a boost because they get to feed on rounds of Eldrazi and other aggro and oops all spells and that kind of thing. So I do have notes from this tournament as well. This was a really great tournament in terms of how fast it was run and my opponents and that kind of thing. This wasn't the best tournament in terms of how it was ran by the TO, I would say. The biggest problem with this event is I told you that Europe was a 4-day event. This was a 2-day event. And because it was a 2-day event, you couldn't play both Legacy and Vintage unless you did really poorly in Legacy. So Legacy played on Saturday and was 9 rounds, cut X and 3, 2 more rounds, so 11 rounds day 1, and then 3 rounds on the next day. So no matter what, you could have to pick one event. And if I had one major complaint, if I had one thing you must fix for Eternal Weekend in Asia, make this a 3-day event, make Vintage on Friday, make Legacy Saturday, Sunday. Do something that lets you play in both events. You need to change the structure so that we can play in both events. If you can't play in both events, it's not Eternal Weekend to me. You're only playing in, the ability to only play in one event is a huge deal breaker. If I had known I would only play in one event, I might not have even gone. That wasn't really described when it was announced. And it may be a significant barrier to me going back again next year. So take that as it may. I started round 1 of this tournament with a loss. I played against Mono White, and I got crushed. My opponent went Mana Crypt, Void Mirror against a Tolarian Academy hand, and I just died. And in game 2, I actually had a much better hand where my opponent also had a Mana Crypt, Void Mirror, but I forced the Mana Crypt, and I had a Scroll for Ancestral, and so I Ancestraled, and there were just no lands in my top 30 cards. I just had no lands. I could never draw a land. And then even after the game ended, I looked at the top 10 more cards, and there were no more lands. So, sometimes you just get vintaged, and that one was a pretty unfortunate start against Mono White. Round 2, I did play against Jewel, like I said I might. In game 1, my opponent went Saga into Ring, and even though I had a dress down for the Saga tokens, I had no force for the Ring, and I just ended up getting buried. Game 2, there was an Ancestral with Force of Will backup, but I had it covered with Misstep plus Force of Will backup, and then I ended up getting a Lurrus and a Bauble Loop into a stock up and win. And then game 3, my opponent had a really slow hand, and I had a Force of Negation Academy hand, and I basically ripped a Mox off the top on turn 1 so I could play turn 1 stock up. And after turn 1 stock up, my hand was full of counters for the rest of the game. At one point, I think I had 8 permission spells in hand after a Bauble on my opponent's upkeep. So I got to play the control role in the Jewel matchup and take a nice win. That was really nice because I think I used both Consigns in that game, and Consign was the main swap I made before the event. Round 3, I played against Mono White again, and I fell behind super early. I was able to do a really cool thing where I chained my opponent's Chrome Mox as their only white source because they had already resolved a Void Mirror and a Chalice. But then they ran off 4 straight Wastelands, and I died. Game 2, my opponent resolved 2 early Deafening Silences, which I was not expecting. It actually made me put the Mental Misstep back in for game 3. Game 2, my opponent had 2 early Deafening Silences, but I actually was able to just play a long and grindy game. And this is the game. This is my library. It's got 7 cards left, and I didn't PO once in this game. I PO'd no times. I just slowly and surely played out all my trainers, used 4 swords, used 3 Flame of Anor, and eventually ground out a win. It was a really cool game. I'm glad I was able to take a picture of it because it's just a perfect encapsulation of the the Jeskai control game plan. Game 3, I probably kept a bad hand, but it was a super powerful Academy hand. Or no, maybe it's just a super powerful Mox hand with Deafening Silence and Void Mirror. Deafening Silence and Vexing Bauble were covered by Misstep. But my opponent went turn 1 Thalia, and I just missed just enough for my opponent to draw a 3rd land and play 4 straight White Plume Adventures and die. So I actually started this tournament 1-2 as well. I think, like I said, I think this set versus Mono White, I could maybe have should maybe have mulliganed my game 3 hand, and my opponent maybe should have mulliganed their game 3 hand as well, which is pretty funny. We talked about it a little bit after. I actually think my opponent in this round went on to go top 32 and get a prize promo card, so props to them. But this one, I couldn't have done anything about this Mono White matchup. It was just things that happened. So I rolled into spoiler alert, round 4, where I played against Red White Burning Wish Moonstompy. And it was a very close 3-game set. And I'm showing you this card because this is a card that I have never seen in my life. And my opponent showed it to me in Japanese off of Burning Wish, and I had to get a judge because I'm not only do I not know what this card says in Japanese, I've never seen this card in English. And this is a Flowstone Flood. So game 1 of my matchup here, my opponent used Force of Pyroblast, Simian Spirit Guide pitch to Pyroblast to beat my Ancestral Recall, and then Simian Spirit Guide out a Null Rod Void Mirror Lock, but didn't have any follow-up lands. And so I just got to use stock ups and lands and overpower my opponent. In game 2, my opponent played early Null Rod Void Mirror, and then I fetched Basic Island. They cast Burning Wish and got Flowstone Flood and destroyed my island. Followed it up with a Blood Moon, and then I was completely locked out of the game. So I just did not see that coming and got completely run over by Flowstone Flood. In game 3, I had forced 2 things already, and I was like super close to making it on. My opponent couldn't catch up, but I was also super close to losing. And my opponent resolved a Magus of the Moon, which made my Tundra into a 3-color a mountain. So I was able to cast Flame of Anor on my opponent's Magus and their something else, and that would have 100% won the game. But my opponent had Pyroblast for it. But I ripped the 3rd Force of Will that turn and was able to protect it. And I was legitimately 1 draw step from losing to Red White Burning Wish Moonstompy. Oh boy, and that's the kind of tournament this was. So 2-2. I then play against Oath. I kind of really overpowered my Oath opponent in these matchups. In game 1, I traded my spells early, and I let them resolve a DT because I had misstep covering for the Ancestral. He had 2 Force of Wills for my stuff, but I recovered with a stock up in 1. And then in game 2, I got to play super controlling, just hitting land drops, never using Moxen. There was a Null Rod in play for the whole game. And I basically like waited as long as possible before playing any trainers and stuff. And when I did play a trainer on the next turn, I just Flame of Anord to draw 2 and kill my trainer. Before my opponent even played an Oath, I just killed my trainer off. And it actually worked out really well because my opponent untapped and went like Oath Time Walk, and I couldn't have dealt with it. They ended up saying it was a mistake because they thought the trainer was still in play. They forgot they didn't have a ability to trigger it. So I actually got like a really far ahead by killing my own trainer with my own Flame of Anor. And then my opponent like, oh, okay, I'll try to just cast Atraxa, but then they have a Null Rod in play and their 2 Moxen are turned off and they can't even cast Atraxa. So just a crazy set. But I was able to beat Oath there. And then we go to round 6. Round 6 was actually the player from my Emperor of Vintage semifinals, that Breach PO player who I played in that event in the semifinals. And I ran over my opponent in this game as well. I put an early trainer and I sent 2 Flame of Anors at Moxen to turn off, to like make sure Metalcraft didn't come off and to get Tolarian Academy. So like killing a Moxen was minus like 2.5 mana. And so I just like used early Flame of Anors to stop them from playing mana. And then my opponent had a cool play where they cast Brain Freeze after I topped a card with Archive, but the card I topped was a land because I just wanted to get more land, so it wasn't even a huge deal. And then game 2, I had an early Crip and force a fast stock up. And then I had an early Mana Crypt, so I forced their fast stock up. Then I untapped and went for stock up on my turn, but I think it was wrong. I think I should have just held open Pyroblast, but the reason I didn't hold open Pyroblast is I'm like, if they don't have a second stock up, then like it's not very good. The problem is my opponent did have a second stock up, so they immediately went like stock up into Ancestral, but I just had enough tempo from the first turn stock up that it was enough anyway, so maybe it was still good. But I got that in 2. And then in round 7, I got run over. I played against a Jeskai PO deck that was not Lurrus. It had a bunch of Tezzerets, and my opponent started the game with like Ancestral Lotus, Tezzeret, Volt, and with Force of Will Fluster backup. I did notice my opponent, when I probed my opponent, they had the Mental Misstep promo, which I thought was pretty cool. So we had 2 Mental Misstep promos battling against each other. And then in game 2 was more of the same, like a ton of open fast mana, Tezzeret, Pyroblast for my Flame of Anor, and died to a PO on turn like 3. So I just got vintage a little bit. I will say that having a bunch of Tezzerets and Tinker and stuff certainly feels more powerful than playing Lurrus if the game does never makes it to Lurrus. If the game never makes it to Lurrus, like having access to Tezzeret felt really good for my opponent, and they were able to really bully me. So I don't know. I don't know if there's like an actual lesson there, and maybe people should be playing more Tinker PO. Tinker PO did very well at this event. There's only a few players, but they went like 60% win rate or something crazy. So maybe Tinker PO is like being played less than it should be, but it definitely felt bad for me there. And then the very last round, I played against Mono White again, and I got revenge. In game 1, I like made a mistake where I played 4 Theralingas for 4 on turn 1, and it wasn't good. It just wasn't good. Like they played too many creatures, and I actually like got in a really bad spot. But that was the game where on the very last turn, I like Chain of Vapored for sacking 4 lands and PO comboed with 1 life left and went all the way through my deck and won. And then game 2 was a lot easier. It was like I got ahead on mana and I just like removed all their creatures and all their permanents and just cast Stress Down Loops with Lurrus, and it was very easy. So, but yeah, if you look at this, I actually only played against Lurrus 1 time in my 8 rounds. I played against Lurrus once, so that was kind of sad because I prefer playing Lurrus matchups. I think they're more fun. But you know, pretty cool event. I went 5-3, ended up like 74th place. No prizes, no nothing, but 5-3, a respectable showing that I'm not unhappy about. And Lurrus PO on the whole did pretty reasonably as like the third most played deck, and you know, a decently high win rate, 53% win rate. But yeah, I actually had a lot of fun playing the actual matches of Magic was a lot of fun for Eternal Weekend in Japan. Yeah, going forward, like I said, I think that my list is quite good. I still don't see any reason why you can't play this list. I would maybe consider changing up, like I said, maybe the Mox Opal and the Mishra's Bauble. Mishra's Bauble is like a lot less useful if you don't have second Mox Opal, and you don't need it as much if you have the main deck Soul Guide Lantern. So maybe turning Opal and Mishra's Bauble into 2 more blue cards is a route to go down. I know people have already done that in previous builds elsewhere, and I'm still a little hesitant to do that because I think having access to Opal is having access to your powerful plays, but maybe it's a direction that makes a lot of sense if you're going to continue playing this very controlling style. Like I said before, I got second at that Osaka event, and this actually was it's really kind of a crazy story, but I wanted the first 2 placements at this event won actual factual yen, like prize money. But the way they do prize money is not cash, it's by bank transfer, and I don't have a Japanese bank account, so I couldn't do that. And I was like, well, why don't we give the prize money to Eric and let him get the bank transfer, and he'll just give me cash. And they're like, no, we can't do that because it's Japan. We can't deviate from the procedure. It's like, okay, fine. What else can we do? And they're like, okay, we'll give you Haruya store credit. It's like, okay, fine. So I had a bunch of Haruya store credit, and I turned that Haruya store credit into the 2 foil Japanese retro frame Misty Rainforest, and the foil Japanese retro frame Scalding Tarn, and the foil Meticulous Archive. So my deck now has a bunch of foil lands in it, which is really good because I need to make sure I have no patterns with my foils, and they're all very beautiful cards. I'll try to get this Polluted Delta fixed up at some point into like an Onslaught one for the aesthetic. But got some nice pretty cards, which is always fun, and you know pretty good deal on them. And so I came back from this tournament with something. I would say overall I'm disappointed, right? Because this was the worst year for Eternal Weekend for me ever. I played 5 Eternal Weekend events and I came out with 0 promos. My win rates were not good across the board. 5-5, 3-4, 5-3 in Vintage means I was, slightly above 50% win rate, which is far cry from my normal 70% win rate in Eternal Weekends and Vintage. Legacy actually went okay. Both Legacy events I did pretty well in. I actually did better in Legacy than I did in Vintage for whatever reason. But yeah, going home with no promos is rough, but that's Magic. As we continue into the year, we have Mox coming up. Q1 Vintage is soon. So there will be a lot more reasons to continue playing high stakes Magic online, and I will make sure that we can get content for that. I'll do just a quick ending segment where we look at some pictures real quick. This is my Eternal Weekend photos. So lots of Italian food, Florence pictures. I'm just going to scan through these really quickly because it is quite long and I don't want to go crazy, but look at this steak. Oh my God. Florentine steak. Crazy. Italian food is something else. Here's a picture from Eternal Weekend. The view from the Eternal Weekend venue is very beautiful. It's a really nice place. The beer. Having beer at a Magic tournament just elevates the Magic tournament in my eyes. Some early morning shots from Rome. Then we're over in Kyoto. This was probably my best meal in Japan, was this gyoza restaurant that was like Michelin recommended at one point. Ah, now I'm hungry. Inari Shrine, big hike, different kind of Kyoto temples and castles and that kind of thing. Went on a hike through the Kyoto trails, bamboo forests, big hike. I did something like 70 miles of walking on my trip in general. Got some wagyu. There's my sad face Justin from Vintage. There's the Haruya shop in Osaka. Shinkansen train ride. This curry meal was unbelievable. This was great. This was like a hole in the wall curry place. This is the curry place. It had like 4 seats in it. And the menu is just a chalkboard with the curry of the day A and curry of the day B. And you can get A plus B curry. And oh man, I would kill for some A plus B curry right now. Then you see some Tokyo pictures, some souffle, pancakes, different kinds of Akihabara, gaming, Shinjuku Neon Walk, lots of light up things because it was Christmas time. So there's tons of light shows and Christmas shows. This was an izakaya and just great chicken. Oh, now I'm so hungry. I'm gonna go eat right after this now. I did Tokyo Labs, which I think is cool to do once, especially if you're like a more artsy person. I didn't really know what to expect. It was a little I don't know. I don't know how to explain the Tokyo Labs or Team Labs Tokyo planets. It was cool. I definitely remember. They're all over the world now. I think they're in tons of different places, and they're pretty interesting. How is it? Sensory experience. That's the word. Not sensual. Not sensual. Sensory. Here's the big Gundam. Huge Gundam. Sensoji, the temple, the sky tree, the river walk. Got tons of I'm a hater. I'm a big hater of observatories and like high vantage points that you have to pay to go up on. I'm actually a big hater. This one was worth it. Tokyo at night is so expansive. It's just buildings and lights for miles in any direction, and it is absolutely breathtaking. It's incredible. So, tourist trap, of course, but I actually do recommend Tokyo Skytree if you want to get a full grasp of what is Tokyo, because Tokyo is just an unbelievable city. This is I found the stairs from Your Name. It's my one anime pilgrimage from the trip. I was really happy to go. See, this is pretty easy to get to, like one stop away from Shinjuku. So got to stop in there. Got the famous famchiki. Not actually famous, but the fact that I can go to a convenience store at any time of day and get reasonably good hot food, alcohol, anything is just it's kind of unmatched. Shibuya Crossing. Shibuya Crossing was actually pretty dead when we went there. This is not that many people. We did go back there and it was a little bit more busy at one point. Hachiko Ramen, of course. Capsule Games. Here's we got some drinks on this terrace overlooking a different part of the city. That was pretty cool. This is in Shinjuku, the bar alleys where there's like 100 little small bars. We went there before, it all opened up. But I think it's just the aesthetic of this is awesome. Kind of wish I went there during the the night, but it might have been a bit of an overload for me there. Yeah, we just were able to see a lot of really beautiful places, cool things. Just a great trip, honestly. This is I have a picture. This was like a pop-up bar for Christmas that was on the 12th floor of a mall overlooking Shibuya Crossing. So I got an expensive drink and sat and watched people cross in the Shibuya Crossing before going out for dinner. That was really cool because we went out for dinner with the Discord. Thanks to Kevin, who was the only person not looking at this picture. But Kevin organized a little meal for some vintage gamers in the Discord. Shout out to all these gamers. It was a lot of fun, actually. Glad we went. Got really drunk. Had a lot of beer. So it was a really good time. Yeah, this is Yokohama down here. I do think that Yokohama as a city area where we did the Vintage Eternal weekend was okay. It was very interesting. It was a very touristy place for like Japanese people to visit. It was crazy packed, so it was kind of hard to get food all the time. But got some mall rice finally. But yeah, I actually think Yokohama as like a destination in terms of like seeing things was really awesome. So I got to on Saturday, instead of playing Legacy because I couldn't play Vintage if I played Legacy, I just went around Yokohama and we went to this little North Korean spy boat museum. They like, fit a boat inside of a boat, and they had a rail gun. This rail gun, it's crazy, cool exhibit. And then walked further down, and there was this 1930s ocean liner that used to cross the Pacific, turned into a museum. So I got to walk through that and check out all the old navigation and gadgets and those kind of things. A really cool museum as well. And then Yokohama Chinatown is unbelievable. One of the craziest Chinatowns I've ever seen. Just packed with people, tons of shops, and a really impressive Chinatown. Really, really beautiful. And got a nice little vantage point on the top of Yokohama overlooking the bay and Sky Tower down here and that kind of thing. Tons, like I said, tons of different winter parks and light shows all set up. So, yeah, this was my last meal in Tokyo at the airport. Katsudan. But awesome trip. It was a really great trip. And like I said, after the last trip as well, thank you to everyone who stopped and said hi to me. I really appreciate that. I got a lot of people who it was, again, their first time playing Paper Vintage. People saying, oh, you helped me get into the format, which is honestly the number one reason we're still doing this. I think that it's really good. I love playing the format, and the only way I get to play the format is if other people play. So thank you for playing Vintage with us. It's tons of fun, and I hope everyone had a great time and continues to play Vintage. Shout out especially to the people who organize things. Rama Log T1 did a ton of extra work to make sure the Europe leg of my trip was a success. So thank you, of course, to Raffaele, and thanks to Kevin for organizing that event in Tokyo. Eric, took us to dinner in Osaka after the tournament. Yeah, shout out to Justin, who's in Korea, probably by now. We haven't gotten to eat the the snacks yet, but we're going to soon. Thanks for all the support from everyone on Discord, Patreon, YouTube, Twitch, Paper, everything. We're going to get back into the swing of things very shortly. I hope everyone had a nice little break from me for the past 3 weeks. And we'll be back playing Vintage on this YouTube channel every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'll see you then.